Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing of the Russian campaign, designed by John Edwards and published by GMT Games. This is the Deluxe 5th edition of this classic from the 1970s depicting the campaign of Germany against the Soviet Union in World War II. With some sweeping and comprehensive rule changes, updated graphics, and 5 scenarios in addition to its full campaign game, there's a lot to look at inside. Let's open it up and get started. As we start to take a look at the Russian campaign, I think the one thing that's evident as I've kind of gone through the game and looked at the materials and things like that is that the design team has really kind of dove into, if you would, the representative history of this game. So this is a game that has an ardent and passionate following of players that play it at tournament level, who have played this game hundreds, if not thousands of hours. I mean, played every single option of it. So this game has a rich and deep history, probably one of the most played war games in board wargaming history. And the design team, I think, has done a marvelous job of tapping into that history and incorporating that into this version. Now, I will say it did take them a long time, right? This went up on GMT Games website 2017. It's 2023. So making this version of the game actually took longer than the Russian campaign that's represented in the game. So a lot of love and attention and dedication towards sorting through all the optional rules and bonus material and bringing all of the rule kind of considerations into this version of the game to try to make it the best version of this game that has ever existed. So that's one thing I'd like to point out. Now let's take a look, however, at the back of the box here and go through some just general characteristics of the game. I'm going to mainly call our attention to this game meter, and GMT Games now adding a replay value number in here, which is interesting. They give this one an 8, and I think that's a little bit high, perhaps. I mean, there is a ton of replayability in here. First up, you've got 5 scenarios in a campaign game. So yes, that's replayable. Then you've got kind of your core rules and a lot of optional rules you can fold in as well. So that adds to replayability. And then there's been a ton of bonus material, as we'll look at the rulebook that's been developed over the course of the years, published in magazines and in various places, and they've brought in the best of that content as well, which adds even more replayability to it. And then you have the factor that the game has so many different strategies, tactics, approaches that you can take as either side. So it's a game that you can play over and over and over again that's still very, very rich. Having said that, it is really one campaign with a few scenarios around it. So maybe an 8's a little high. I might be certainly tons of replayability, but I might be inclined to give it a 7 rather than an 8. Complexity level, it gives it a 5. And I think this is one that probably varies a little bit. I think if you stick to the core rules, as we'll see and take a look at, I'd be inclined that it's a little bit more along that 4 level rather than a 5, at least comparative to other GMT games that I've played and looked at. They give it a 5. Certainly if you add in the optional rules and add in a lot of the bonus material, then I think you're drifting up into that 5 level. So it's probably more of a range game than it is one set figure. I'd say a 4 or 5 feels pretty good for this one. Lastly, Solitaire is given an 8. There's nothing in here that is going to break a Solitaire game, like hidden movement and things like that. So definitely eminently playable as a Solitaire experience. An 8, considering that there's no AI bot or AI rules and things like that, though, I feel like an 8's a little bit ambitious for that. I might be inclined to give it a 7, but certainly something that you can enjoy to great depth playing Solitaire. So let's start out here with a look at the rulebook. Now the rulebook is rather large. It is 36 pages. So you might be saying, well, that certainly feels like a 5 in difficulty. But we want to take a little bit of look at the inside, at the truth that lies within here. And what we get to is that victory conditions for the game and the last part of the core rules end on page 19. So in that regard, your core rules to this game really start on, and this is kind of an introduction. So really it's about 17 pages, about 17 pages of rules, and as we can see, lots of graphics in here, lots of helpful graphics. I think that's where a lot of time and attention has been spent on this version, is kind of clarifying the rules, rewriting portions that might have been a little tricky to interpret, and really just kind of making the game a little bit easier to learn. In particular, there's one part in here that looks like, and the developer notes mention this too, the more complex part of this game involves rail movement, which from reading through the developer's notes, it sounds like there was a lot of conversation about how to handle this in the new version. and it was something that kind of was regarded as the most complex part of the original game. And as we can see, it's 1, 2, 3 full pages dedicated to rail movement with a lot of graphics. So what they finally decided to do was to really try to clarify and simplify these rules a little bit to make it both easier to learn while keeping true to the original design in terms of functionality. So looks like they've done a really good job with that section, although it is by far the biggest section, it looks like, of the rules in itself there. But yeah, so nice and clear rules here. We get through that. I do want to take a look here after you get through the core rules and we get to victory conditions. Once we get to page 20, we get a lot more stuff here. So there are optional rules, and optional rules, there are a bunch of different optional rules, and it starts on page 20, and optional rules go through all the way up here to optional page 23. Optional worker units, Russian recovery, competitive bidding for sides, historical naval restrictions, Russian artillery barrages, fortress cities, Hungarian neutrality, and Romanian logistics. So lots of different ways that you can kind of add things in after you've played through the game once or twice and kind of make the game a little bit more complex or suited kind of to your liking. And that's not all. Then we get the scenario depictions in here, and we'll take a look at some of the setup cards for those. That's rather short here. Goes through here. Page 26 is where the really interesting part starts. This is bonus material. And basically what the rules mention here is that these are all of the things that were developed, the better parts. I imagine there's probably some that haven't been included, but they've kind of culled through all of the content from things like magazines and other publications that created variants and optional rules and different ways you could play the game and things like that, and built in all of the best of these kind of bonus materials that have been added over the years into both the rule book here and into the counter set. So you get everything you need to add these to the original Russian campaign experience, which seems really cool. In particular, the one that caught my attention here starts here, which gives you alternative strategic scenarios. So basically it says it's kind of a depiction of other other things that could have happened on a grander scale. For example, Hitler decides not to invade the Balkans, so it's called the Mediterranean distraction. So you can add that influence into the game, which changes the composition and the size and kind of amount of units and things. And then based on that, you can get a Russian reaction. There's also the Japanese gambit and a couple of other ones in here. Putting the bulge on the Russians, so a different shift. And here we get a little bit of a flow chart. There's really 3 parts to it, which is this Mediterranean distraction. If the Germans choose that, then the Russians get to choose a Russian choice, or Germans cannot do that. Then the Japanese gambit plays in here. So it's kind of a little flow chart that creates these optional choices, which kind of creates a variation on the traditional gameplay, if you would, which again gets back to that idea. There's a lot of depth in here and different ways to explore the game. So this one in particular caught my attention there. Then we get to the end. We've got the index and some developer notes, some credits and things like that that go here. Developer notes, a fascinating read here too, in terms of how they approach the kind of the development and the design of this fifth edition of the game. So there we go. There's the rules in there. Let's jump in and take a look at the counters now. Now there are a couple more things I want to mention that really caught my eye with this development of this game, and one of them is coming up pretty soon here, especially regarding the counters. So we're looking at the Russian counters here, and basically they're all 5/8 of an inch. They're printed on both sides, although there is no step system in this game. They've kept true to the original design of the game in that regard. The back information here is basically the unit designation, some setup information, and then a game turn, basically when it would show up as a reinforcement to help to kind of speed up the play and the setup of the game here. But we're looking now at the Russian units, and there's a couple things I want to call attention to. First up, you can use either the NATO symbols for the armored units or the mechanized units too, or you can use these silhouettes. You've got your option. These are the same counters. You can pick whichever way you would like to go, but they're basically the same thing there. And then I want to call attention here. Here are the Russian cavalry units, 2 7s. We've got the cavalry designation, and if you'll notice, there are more Russian cavalry units here, 6 identical units down here on counter sheet number 3. You might be saying, why have duplicate units? And I think this goes to show kind of the attention and care that the design team put into this game, and it blows my mind for a couple of reasons. There are 2 sets of units, and here's the reason. They noticed that in gameplay, when this game gets played a lot, and the cavalry units get moved more than a lot of other Russian units. So these are the counters that wear out the fastest. So because they wear out the fastest, they give you backup counters so that when your first set wears out, you've got replacements. Now that just blows my mind. It blows my mind for two reasons. One, it blows my mind that a game gets played that much that you'd actually wear the counters out. And the second thing is that the design team took that into consideration and actually gave you a second set of cavalry counters because they know the first set's going to wear out. So yeah, I thought that was just, that's like, this is a different type of game. I've not seen a design or a game with a history quite like this one as it comes into this 5th edition. But anyway, yes, we've got the Russian counters here, the guards units in red and things like that, and they are all there and look good. Again, 5/8 of an inch, nice, clean, easy to read, very good registration on these two. Then we float into the Axis counters, SS up here in the black, and again, Axis and their allies down here. And once again, too, all of the counters for those bonus material rules are here too, so you don't have to worry about anything there as well. And again, we've got a backside on the German units here, nice and elegant. I mean, they're very straightforward. You know, kind of keeping true, I think, to that original design. These are really clean, easy to use, nice big numbers and stuff like that. Really good printing job here on these. Now we have, of course, our counters. We've got the odds here. We've got some other different elements for kind of controlling gameplay on the map. But a very straightforward, nice, easy, clean counter set that looks like it's going to be just very functional and a joy to use. Now we get our player aids, and there are a good bit of them here. We've got 2 movement charts that also have the combat results table, movement allowance charts, and then the back side of these are the terrain effects charts. Nice clean design, like the color palette, easy to read, easy on the eyes, very straightforward in terms of using how to interpret them and stuff like that, and being able to bring them into gameplay. So really nice job on these. These are kind of a thinner cardboard, but they feel sturdy and like they're going to be very handy to use, so no worries there. Then we get a combat results, another combat results table with a movement allowance chart, and I'm not sure why you would get an extra one like that. Maybe that's just, this is more functional? Interesting. I'm not quite sure why that extra player's aid. Then I think there's only one of those. I'm not quite sure on that. Then these are, so again, there are 5 scenarios and the campaign game in the game. So lots of ability to play of different lengths. I think the shortest scenario is 5 turns. And then the campaign one, each turn in the game is 2 months. The campaign game, I think, is 25 months. I think unless, probably there's some conditions which it could end before that too. But here is the bagration kind of setup. So this gives you your order of battle for this one. So really easy to kind of pull these out and set these up and to use these for controlling the setup of the various scenarios. And here's Citadel, and then we have Fall Blau, that's here too. So these are the other scenarios, the 3 scenarios there. And then we get the Axis Order of Battle. This is a larger double sheet here that takes the Axis Order of Battle for the standard game. So you've got your at the start and then all your reinforcements that come into gameplay. And there is the optionals game, and I'm not quite sure what the difference is in terms of maybe these just add the units that are in the optional rules that you could add in. That would probably make the most sense for this. But again, we've got the at start and reinforcements, but nice clean design. Looks like it's going to make setup and organization to get started with the game to kind of greatly speed that up. And we have the Russian one that looks basically the same, you know, at the start, and then reinforcements, and of course more German units at the start of the standard game than the Russians have available as they're going to get pushed back quite severely at the beginning. Then we have Russian Order of Battle for the optionals game, and we come into a separate weather chart, one-sided, that's got your different weather options here, and die rolls for changing the weather, and weather die roll modifier track, so there's a whole system for weather in the game as well. And now, through the player aids, we come to the maps. But before we come to the maps, I want to call attention to this little map, if you would. And I'll show a close-up of this. When I came to this, my first thought was, what? There's a typo on the map, and they gave you this little thing to stick on top of it? What the heck? Then my second thought was, well, no, maybe this is like a learning scenario, like a 3-hex learning scenario. I'm just kidding. But I wondered, like, why is this here? And it actually is an overlay that sits on a special portion of the map. And we'll take a look at this. But and I'll talk about this when we take a look at the larger map. Now, these are the paper maps that come with the game, but I'm going to put this off to the side here. I ended up ordering the mounted maps here, which are nice, thick maps that go there. Now, there are 2 maps in the game, and they fit together Each one is 22 by 34, and they fit together along that 34-inch edge. And I'll show a zoomed out version of these together, and then we'll take a look at some close-ups on some of these too. So then what you've got is a 44 by 34 footprint if you put all of these, both of these two maps together. But just, I really like the printing, the design. This is, you know, I think it stays true to the original from what I understand of the original, but just really upgraded the functionality of the boards and the charts and stuff like that that are on it. Really nice, colorful, easy to read and things like that. And I'll show close-ups on some of these as well. But basically we're looking here at this northern map now, or at least the part of it that I can fit onto the screen. But I love the color footprint. I love everything that's here. Looks really good. Looks like it's going to be very functional and easy to play, and really excited to dig in. I mean, we have Berlin off to the west and all the way to Moscow, Stalingrad, and of course, Leningrad in the east. So very excited to give this classic game a play, and just, I like the art style on the map. I mean, it's nothing overly extravagant. It looks like it's designed functional for gameplay, but the mounted maps are really nice. We'll pull out this second one here. I'll show, again, some close-ups of things as we're looking, as we're kind of getting this out here. But again, typical GMT quality in terms of mounted maps, really nice printing, really good quality and design. The maps look great, and they really work really well. So this chunk of the map here overlays right here if you want to put it in. And the reason it's here, again, is that kind of element that I think really shows and highlights the passion that players have for this game. So apparently there has been a long and traditional argument over whether these, of the roughness of these terrains, whether they're actually hills that should slow down advancing units and slow down units' movements, or whether they're more representative of regular terrain. And so rather than pick a side in this argument, the design team said, we're going to leave these as rough in the way we had them in the original game, but if you really insist on those being flat units, you can drop this little overlay on top of it, and now everybody's happy. Well, I mean, I guess the team that got this, the side that thinks they should be straight clear hexes would not be as happy because they have to overlay this, but at least you can do it, right? You can put it in there and do that. So again, this highlights to me, I think, the passion that the players have, that there's been a long-standing argument over what this actual terrain is like in the rule, and the fact that it shouldn't be rough terrain like that. It should be clear terrain that would be easier to navigate for units. So cool to see this in the game, and it cracked me up that it was there as well. But yeah, like the maps, I love them. They really look good. I think they're very beautiful and things like that. I'm very excited to kind of give this one a play. Looks like a fascinating job that has been done on rebuilding this game in this Designer 5th edition. So we can close that one up now, I think, as the Russian campaign. Very excited to take a look at this one and kind of check it out in terms of gameplay. Let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything I can do to help to answer questions. Thanks so much for watching. I will put a link to a couple of other unboxings here on related games to the Russian campaign that might be of interest to you as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.